Mahamsa Parivakachar Sotar Sadashi Mad, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananikoti Vaishnava Vinda Ki Jai, Namachar Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Prema Gaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Gita Govardhani Ki Jai, Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Yamuna Mai Ki Jai, Tulasi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinda Ki Jai, Gaur Bhimanandi Hari Hari Bol. All glorious assembled devotees, all glorious assembled devotees, all glorious assembled devotees, all glory to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga, glory to Srila Prabhupada. So reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, second canto, chapter 7, text 47. Swasvat Prashantam Abhayam Pratibodha Matram Sudam Sumam Sad Asata Paramatma Tatvam Shobdo Na Yata Puru Karakavan Kriyarto Maya Paraitva Mukecha Vilaj Jamana Tad Vai Padam Bhagavata Paramasya Pumso Brahmeti Yat Vidur Ajasra Sukham Vishokam Swasvat Pasantam Abhayam Pratibodhamatram Sudam Saman Sat Asata Paramatmastatvam Sabdo Nayatra Puru Karakavan Kriyarto Maya Parai Tva Mukecha Vilajan Mana Tadvai Padam Bhagavata Paramasya Pumso Brahmeti Yat Virdur Ajasra Sukham Vishokam Someone you could chant? So if the Maharaji's could chant. Okay, well. So if the Maharaji's could chant now. Okay, so because of the long verse and purport, I'm just going to say the word for word myself. Sasvat, eternal. Prasantam, without disturbance. Abhayam, without fear. Pratibodha matram, a consciousness opposed to the material counterpart. Sudam, uncontaminated. Samam, without distinction. Sat asataha, of the cause and effect. Paramatmatatvam, the principle of primeval cause. Shadaha, speculative sound. Na, not. Yatra, where there is. Puru karakavam, resulting in fruitive action. Kriya artaha, for the matter of sacrifice. Maya, illusion. Paraiti, flies away. Abhimuke, in front of. Cha, also. Vilajamana, being ashamed of. Tat, that. Vai, is certainly. Padam, ultimate phase. Bhagavataha, of the personality of Godhead. Paramasya, of the Supreme. Pumsaha, of the person. Brahma, the Absolute. Iti, thus. Yat, which. Viduhu, known as. Ajasra, unlimited. Sukham, happiness. Visokam, without grief. Translation. What is realized as the absolute Brahman is full of unlimited bliss without grief. That is certainly the ultimate phase of the supreme enjoyer, the personality of Godhead. He is eternally void of all disturbances and fearless. He is complete consciousness as opposed to matter. Uncontaminated and without distinctions, he is the principal primeval cause of all causes and effects, in whom there is no sacrifice for fruitive activities, and in whom the illusory energy does not stand. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The supreme enjoyer, the personality of Godhead, is the supreme Brahman, or the Sanam Bonam, because of his being the supreme cause of all causes. The conception of impersonal Brahman realization is the first step due to his distinction from the illusory conception of material existence. In other words, impersonal Brahman is a feature of the Absolute, distinct from the material variegatedness, just as light is the conception distinct from its counterpart, darkness. But the light has its variegatedness which is seen by those who further advance in the light, and thus the ultimate realization of Brahman is the source of the Brahman light, the supreme personality of Godhead, the sunum bonum, or the ultimate source of everything. Therefore, meeting the personality of God, it includes realization of the impersonal Brahman as realized at first in contrast with material imbrivity. The personality of Godhead is the third step of Brahman realization. As explained in the first canto, one must understand all three features of the Absolute: Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Pratibodha matram is just the opposite conception of material existence. In matter, there are material miseries, and thus, in the first realization of Brahman, there is a negation of such material imbrivities, and there is a feeling of eternal existence, distinct from the pains of birth and death, disease and old age. That is the primary conception of impersonal Brahman. The Supreme Lord is the Supreme Soul of everything, and therefore, in the Supreme Conception, affection is realized. The conception of affection is due to the relationship of soul to soul. A father is affectionate to his son because there is some relationship of nearness between the son and the father. But that sort of affection in the mature world is full of inebriety. When the personality of God is met, the fullness of affection becomes manifested because of the reality of the affectionate relationship. He is not the object of affection by material tinges of body and mind, but he is the full, naked, uncontaminated object of affection for all living entities, because he is a supersoul, or Paramatma, within everyone's heart. In the liberated stage of affairs, the full-fledged affection for the Lord is awakened. As such, there is an unlimited flow of everlasting happiness without the fear of its being broken, as we have experienced here in the material world. The relationship between the Lord is never broken. Thus, there is no grief and no fear. Such happiness is inexplicable by words, and there can be no attempt to generate such happiness by fruitive activities, by arrangements and sacrifices. But we must also know that happiness, unbroken happiness, exchanged with the Supreme Person, the personality of Godhead, as described in this verse, transcends the impersonal conception of the Upanishads. In the Upanishads, the description is more or less negation of the material conception of things. But this is not denial of the transcendental senses of the Supreme Lord. Herein also, the same is affirmed in the statements about the material elements. They are all transcendental, free from all contamination and material identification. And also the liberated souls are not devoid of senses. Otherwise, there cannot be any reciprocation of unhampered spiritual happiness exchanged between them in spontaneous, unbroken joy. All the senses, both of the Lord and of the devotees, are without material contamination. They are so because they are beyond the material cause and effects, as already mentioned herein. Sat asataha param. The illusory material energy cannot work there, being ashamed before the Lord and his transcendental devotees. In the material world, the sense activities are not without grief, but here it is clearly said that the senses of the Lord and the devotees are without any grief. There is a distinct difference between the material and spiritual senses, and one should understand it without denying the spiritual senses because of a material conception. The senses in the material world are surcharged with material ignorance. In every way, the authorities have recommended purification of the senses from the material conception. In the material world, the senses are manipulated for individual and personal satisfaction, whereas in the spiritual world, the senses are properly used for the purpose for which they were originally meant, namely, the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. Such sensual activities are natural, and therefore sense gratification there is uninterrupted and unbroken by material contamination, because the senses are spiritually purified. And such satisfaction of the senses is equally shared by the transcendental reciprocators, since the activities are unlimited and constantly increasing. There is no scope for material attempts or artificial arrangements. Such happiness of transcendental quality is called Brahma Sokyam, which will be clearly described in the 5th canto. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Bastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharne Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Vaskachade Shadarne. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So in this material world, everyone wants happiness, but nobody can actually achieve any happiness in this material world. So, but by loving Krishna, we will attain satisfaction. We will attain happiness. So Krishna is within us. He is within our hearts. He wants us to come back to the spiritual world. He wants to reestablish our loving relationship with him. Love means two. We read in the purport about the impersonal conception. So the impersonal conception is simply oneness. But in that oneness, there's no love with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, there could be no happiness. Happiness means two. So Krishna wants us back. He wants us back in the spiritual world. He says, my dear servant, my dear friend. Whatever position we have in the spiritual world, he wants to reciprocate with us. So in this way, he's within our heart. He's encouraging us to come back to home, back to Godhead. He is telling us, you rascal, give up these nasty things and come back to me. You'll be happy. I'll give you all protection. But we are saying, no, sir. I shall become a hog and I shall eat stool and I shall be happy here in this advancement of civilization. So this is the position of the materialists in the material world. They think they can be happy in this material world, but they're simply struggling like anything. They think they are safe, that I'm safe, I'm surrounded by my wife, my children, I have a strong nation, I am so safe. But there is no safety here. In any moment, that could be taken away. Death is there at any moment. It's just like a drop of water on a lotus leaf. It's in any moment, it's tilting. Any moment, it could fall off. So our life is like that. Any moment, death could come, and we can't do anything about it. But we foolishly think that I'm protected by my friends, my relatives, but that's simply insanity, because death could come any moment. It's just simply insane proposition. Just like a madman thinks he is safe. He can just lie down in the street and nothing will happen. He's thinking, I have ordered them to leave me alone, but he is simply a madman. But they don't care for him. He was simply suffer and leave his body. So we want love here, but love cannot be found. Just like a mother or a child, it's not happy until it's in the lap of its mother. So one mother may take the child and put her in her lap, but the child keeps on crying and crying. Until it comes to its real mother, it will not stop. So this is a stage of loving Krishna. Until we take up the stage of loving Krishna, we will not become happy. We will simply be miserable in this material world. So this process of loving Krishna, Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita in the 18th chapter, always think of me, become my devotee, worship me, and offer your homage or obeisances to me. So if we simply do this, then we will become happy. Krishna does not say that to worship me, you have to go to the factory or drive 50 miles away to worship me. No. Krishna says simply do these 4 things. Just worship me, become my devotee, always think of me, and offer your obeisances. So someone may say that, well, if I just do this, then where will the money come? How will I get the money? But Krishna also says in the 9th chapter that if you worship my transcendental form, then I will supply you all necessities of life. So Srila Prabhupada was mentioning this when he was in New Mayapur on the farm there. He says, so you simply do these 4 things and you don't have to worry. Krishna will supply everything. He will supply your food, your flowers, your milk, all your necessities. You don't have to worry. So by approaching Krishna, everything will be supplied, will be satisfied, just like by watering the roots of the tree. All the branches and leaves will become satisfied. So the question is, what is love? Love means not that I come to your house once a week. That's not love. Some people, they just go to their church or the temple just once a week. So this is not love. Love means I've come to your house every day. Every day I come to your house. And there's different exchanges. I give you food from me. I give food to you. You accept food from me. I give you a present. You give me a present. I disclose my mind to you. You disclose your mind to me. So these are the symptoms of love. And there is no motive. Not that I love you for my sense gratification. So in the material world, a boy loves a girl for his sense gratification, and a girl loves a boy for her sense gratification. So this is not love. This is simply lust. So love, whether I enjoy or not, is not a consideration. Just like Prabhupada quoted one poet, I think his name was Kapoor. He said, England, with all your faults, I love you. So no matter how Krishna treats us, like Lord Chaitanya, he prays that even if you handle me roughly by your embrace, or you're not present before me, I will always love you. So that should be our position. We shouldn't demand anything from Krishna. We should simply love him unconditionally. So love means that I love you for your benefit and you love me for my benefit. But if I love somebody for my benefit, then that so-called love is actually lust. And this love, people say, oh, I love everyone, I love everybody in the material world, but they let the animals go to the slaughterhouse. So no, this is not love. Love means for all living entities. All living entities are part and parcel of God. So a devotee of the Lord doesn't even like to see an ant unnecessarily killed. So therefore, we should even be careful as we're walking, not that there's some ants there and we just trample over them, I kill them like that. No, we should be careful. Therefore, even by walking, we should only walk if we're walking for Krishna. Otherwise, if we're not, then we're accountable for the killing of the ants. And there'll be a reaction. So everything we do has a reaction, or things, there's three types of karma. There's akarma, vikarma, and akarma. So akarma is no reaction, vikarma is bad reaction, and karma means good action. So we have to be very careful that everything we do, we offer to Krishna, otherwise there'll be some reaction, and because of that, we have to accept another birth in this material world. So in this way, whatever we get, we should offer to Krishna, just like if somebody offers us 1 cent, then we have to give them back 4 cents in compound interest. So this is a situation in the material world. So in this way, whatever money we get, we have to give it to Krishna. Otherwise, we're obliged to give the compound interest. In this way, we become entangled in this material world. So in the material world, happiness means eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. That's the basic principle of enjoyment in this material world. Just like Prabhupada mentions how the materialists, their enjoyment is simply wine and women. So in this way, even though they're very old, 80 years old, they're going to the nightclub and paying so much to get into the nightclub, and they're dancing there and so many things, and they happen to run into their son who is also there. So this is the material world. Simply try and enjoy this material world, but there's no enjoyment here. It's simply suffering. So simply suffering the material world. So in this material world, there's 7-fold material miserable conditions. There's the 4 changes: birth, death, disease, and old age, mixed in with the 3-fold, which are always mixed in with the 3-fold miseries, namely misery from my mind and my body, miseries from other living entities, and miseries from natural disturbances like it's very hot or very cold. So if we want to get relief from suffering, we have to there has to be absence of distress. But where is there? But if we're in distress, and how? But there's always distress in this material world. Just like if we do not want to die, but we have to die. So where is your happiness? We don't want to become old, but we have to become old. So where is our happiness? We don't want to become diseased, but disease is there for everyone. So where is our happiness? So this is a situation of this material world. So even though we're not this body, this is not a real self, still we have to suffer. Just like in a dream, you're hallucinating that I'm being attacked by a tiger's there, I'm being eaten by a tiger. So the suffering is there like anything, even though it's a hallucination. So similarly, even though we're not these bodies, we still have to suffer because of our false identification with this material body. So in this way, we try to become happy in this material world. We try to amass our assets, and now we're thinking now I have a nice house. Now I could become happy. I got everything together, everything's settled up. But then the next day, the house is set on fire. So this is a material body, it's a house, and at the time of death, it's set on fire. And everything is vanquished. So we want this, the happiness of the materialists. They want the happiness of the mind and the body. They want to satisfy their senses, and they try to satisfy their mind by art and poetry and by philosophy of speculation. But there's no real happiness there. There's no real happiness. Real happiness belongs to the soul, not to the body. So, to enjoy happiness, we want to enjoy the senses, but the senses are not absolute. The spiritual senses work through the physical senses. But the problem is the physical senses are all covered over. Our intelligence and mind are covered over by dirty things. Our senses are covered over. We have this false identification, thinking that I am this body. This is called false ego. And real ego is to think that I'm a servant of Krishna. So ego is there, is a sense of identity, I am. But when we think that I am this body, or that everything in this body belongs to me, then that's false ego, and you cannot be happy by false ego. You can only be happy if you have your real ego. So we want to enjoy, we're covered over. The example is given like if you want to touch something that's soft, enjoy something that's soft. If you put a glove on your hand, then you can't touch the thing very nicely. So in this way, we're covered over. We can't touch things very nicely because we're covered over by this material body. And this material body is just like a cage, just like the bird in the cage. The bird in the cage, you may polish the cage so nicely, but if you don't feed the bird food, then it's going to be very unhappy. And probably gives example of the boy and the bird. The boy bought one bird, and he was talking to the bird. My dear bird, you come with me. I will talk to you. You'll have a nice golden cage, and I will give you nice fruits to eat. But the bird says, I don't want this. I want to be free. I want freedom. So this is what we want. Unless we get freedom, we'll never be happy in this material world. We're simply in the cage. This body is a cage. Therefore, those in the material world are called conditioned or encaged. So our suffering is compared to being put under the water. This is another example that's given. Formerly, they used to punish criminals by dunking them under the water, and then before they would suffocate to death, they would bring them up, and they would like breathe in, and they were thinking, this is so good, this is happiness. But that's material happiness, it's not real happiness. Happiness means when this dunking stops completely. That is real happiness. And such happiness keeps on, it goes on, it never stops. In the material world, you may eat so many, You may eat 4 or 5 rasgullas or 10 rasgullas, but then you say, stop, I can't take any more. But in spiritual life, things keep on increasing and you can keep on enjoying. There's no stop. There's no stop in spiritual life. So if we want real pleasure, we want to satisfy Krishna. That's where real pleasure comes from. Just like the gopis, when they see Krishna is happy, they become happier. And when Krishna sees the gopis are happier, he becomes happier. And this way, there's constant competition between both of them. But in the material world, it's the complete opposite. If you become happy, I become unhappy. And if you become happy, I become unhappy. So this is the condition in the material world, just the opposite. Everything in the material world is a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. So we have to become dependent upon Krishna. Krishna says this, just surrender unto me. And by becoming dependent, we will become happy. But instead of that, we are falsely making a declaration of independence that I will become independent, I will not serve Krishna, I will become independent and I will become Krishna. So by that mentality, we simply suffer. So in this way, we have to accept these instructions. We have to hear from the previous acharyas. We have to hear from the Vedic literature. In this way, we get the proper understanding. So if we hear properly and follow the procedure, then we will be successful. But if we hear something false, then we will be misled and we will put ourselves in a dangerous position. Just like there's one story of one man, he was lamenting, he was crying, and like in India when they're in mourning, they shave their head. So he was crying and his head was shaved, and some man came to him and said, "Oh my dear sir, why are you crying? Why did you shave your head?" And he said, "Oh, don't you know? Sangha Singh has died." And he said, "Oh, really? Sangha Singh has died." So he also shaved his head. So then somebody saw him and he said, "Oh, my dear sir, why did you shave your head?" And he said, "Oh, don't you know? Sangha Singh has died." And he said, "Oh, no." So he shaved his head. So this went on and on and on. And then finally it came to the prime minister of the king. And when the prime minister of the king saw this man with the shaven head, he said, "Why did you shave your head?" And he said, "Oh, don't you know Sangha Singh has died?" And he said, "Oh, really?" So he shaved his head. So when the king saw his prime minister with his head shaved, he said, "Why did you shave your head?" And he said, "Oh, don't you know Sangha Singh has died?" And the king said, "Who is Sangha Singh?" And so the minister went to that person, and they traced it back. And finally they came to the original person, and he was asked, "Who is Sangha Singh?" And he said, "Don't you know Sangha Singh is my ass?" So the washerman was crying because his ass had died. So this is the position of the fool. He doesn't inquire. Where does that come from? Is it in the Vedic literature? Is it coming from the previous acharyas? So this we should do. We should trace it back. And many times if you just ask the person, they make some statement, you ask them, where does that come from? What's your authority? And you just keep on asking, why? And then you may find at a certain point they may say, "I don't know, it's just my concoction." So we have to be careful. We have to quote from Scripture. This is the instruction from Prabhupada in the last purport of the second canto, that one should quote from authority, one should hear from authority. In this way, one's life becomes perfect. So we could stop there. Are there any questions on these points? Thank you very much. All glory to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga.